It is a privilege to be here to talk with you on a TED stage. I've, like many of you, watched a lot of TED videos, and to share the stage with people like Boaz Almog, who invented quantum locking, a levitating superconductor, which is total science fiction. He actually shows how, using quantum mechanics, you can rotate a levitating object around a type of magnet or something. I don't understand all the particulars of it. It's really incredible. Or Boyan Slat, the 19-year-old you may have heard of, who designed an ocean cleanup array, which is basically an amazing device to clean up the oceans of all the ridiculous amounts of plastic there are in our overpolluted oceans. 19. Those millennials, they're so selfish, Today, I want to introduce to you another cutting-edge thinker. Only 2,400 years ago, Socrates introduced some ideas to us that I think are fully relevant to our position still. Specifically, I want to talk about his approach to death. And I teach in the liberal studies program here at NYU, and each fall, almost every fall, I teach Socrates' defense, and it's called the Apology. And in his trial, he makes some claims I think are relevant to happiness, and they give a cast to happiness that makes it a little more serious. But every time I'm reading for my classes, I'm always thinking of songs that I want to make a playlist of for my students. And when I read Socrates' Apology, I think of the song by Wilco, War on War. And here are the lines that I keep thinking of. You have to lose. You have to learn how to die. If you want to be alive. Okay? I think this is really relevant because there is a sense in which we do have to lose. We do have to come to face with the fact that our lives will end. But the point of these lyrics and the point of some of Socrates' teachings and the Stoics who followed him is that philosophy and philosophical reflection is about learning how to live life by facing that fundamental fact. And if you notice in the last line, it says if you want to be alive. It's not just wanting to be alive, it's wanting to have the desire to be alive, that learning how to die and learning about that fundamental fact actually helps us with. So in Socrates' trial, he's brought to trial by some young upstarts who want to get rid of him because he's super annoying and he's walking around the city engaged in all sorts of activities I'll mention in a moment. But I'm going to give you two ideas that are almost direct quotes, but that come from his defense that I think are entirely relevant and I would argue fairly necessary for us to achieve happiness today. The first is that the unexamined life is not worth living for human beings, right? And this idea, I think, really pushes our ideas of happiness, our ideas of what it means to be joyful, what we want out of life, these types of things, in a little bit different direction, because it's an idea that suggests that if we don't take the time to examine our beliefs, to examine whether or not what we believe personally is actually good for us, is actually what we consider to be true, or whether or not it's something that helps us to succeed in the social context we're in, or helps us to get along with the certain social structures we live under, then if we don't examine those, then we're actually not living a fully human life. And so whatever joy or sort of rewards, a success we might get from playing the game, it won't be fully human. It won't be fully human, and if it's not fully human, it can't be counted as happiness, right? The other idea I want to bring up is another quote from Socrates, from his defense. And that is that the fear of what we are ignorant of is the beginning of vice. Okay? When we are afraid of things we don't know, then we start to behave in ways that actually get in the way of ourselves living a full human life. And in these contexts, these quotes in the context of Socrates' trial are, I think, fully transferable to our position today. Let me say a little bit more about the apology. He's on trial, Socrates, for corrupting the youth of Athens and for blasphemy, for not believing in the gods the city believes in the city of Athens. So he's been brought to trial, and he has been charged with these crimes and charged, and the prosecutors asked for the sentence of death. And so Socrates has to face the idea that if he's found guilty, that he could in fact receive the death sentence. So in his defense, he doesn't capitulate. He doesn't capitulate, and he calls out his fellow members of the Athenian demos, the city, as people who came before him in different trials. People who came before him are on trial who pled and said, look, I've got a family, you can't convict me, right? Please let me go, I'll do anything to get out of this sentence. Socrates isn't saying that because he says those people act shamefully because they actually don't know what's going to happen to them once they die. And they're avoiding death at all costs, even to their own shame and lack of virtue. And that, he thinks, is the root of all vice. They're afraid of what they're ignorant of, and they begin to act in shameful ways. So he says we have no idea what death is like and what may or may not happen after it. So really focusing on our own soul and the shape of our being now is really the path left for us. Now, the title is From YOLO to YODO. So I actually hear this on the streets a lot around NYU, YOLO, and it's an interesting phrase. You only live once. And I think part of what's meant by the people who say this is that there's a release from some type of constraint, right? You only live once. Come on, let's go do this. Let's let go a little bit, right? And there's sort of an expansive version of like letting go of things, letting go perhaps of responsibilities, other things like that. And I think that actually Socrates is inviting us to say you only die once, right? That what you end up doing with your life shouldn't necessarily be framed by the idea that you only live once and throw caution to the wind, but rather you should really be thinking of the fact that you only die once, and that how you die is everything to the shape of your soul and what you have in your control, because so little actually is in our control, right? So let's look ahead here to Socrates' life as he defends it. So Socrates finds out that he's considered by the oracle at Delphi the most wise human being who's ever lived. And he freaks out. He's like, oh my God, I'm not the wisest person, right? I don't know anything, right? And so he goes, let me look around. Let me go to those with the highest reputation for wisdom. Let me go around the city of Athens and find people who can actually teach me what wisdom really is, because I know I don't know anything. So I say he went down to Wall Street. He went down to the Athenian marketplace, right? I mean, he was in the middle of things, and he was asking people, what it is they knew about living a good life, how to be happy in a certain sense. And he went to DC, right? He went down to the politicians, and he asks them as well, the business people, the people in power positions. And then he also asks the artists. So he goes out to Bushwick, and he asks all the artists out there whether or not they have the secret, the wisdom that can teach them what actual happiness is. And what he finds out is they really don't know. They can't give an account. They themselves think they know, but they can't really explain what it is. So he comes to this conclusion, and you may be familiar with it, but it's the famous idea of the Socratic wisdom, or known as the Socratic ignorance. And he says this: I know that I don't know anything. These people don't know anything, and they think they know something. I am that much better off than them, right? Because if you think you know and you don't know, you're much worse off than if you are honest about what you know. This, he says, is what the oracle must have meant, right, when calling me, Socrates, the wisest person. So that activity that he's on trial for, questioning people, being super annoying, and going around constantly showing the people in power positions to be fools in front of their sons and others in the city of Athens, which is why he was considered to be corrupting the youth. This activity of his life is a questioning activity, right? And so I want to suggest to you today that questioning is essential to human happiness, but like the word itself, you are truly set forth on a quest, right? You're set forth on a quest that must be undertaken if one is to achieve the aim of life, to be happy. Because you can't trust just any source to give you the criterion for what is going to be a good life for you. Right? But to ask a legitimate question is to own up to the fact that we don't know. But we should be unafraid what those answers might tell us. That's the Socratic stance with respect to searching for what will make us truly happy. Let's shift a little bit, though, to questions with respect to where we sit in terms of the global marketplace. Because I think that you're all familiar with a variety of sources or forces outside of our own individuality that are suggesting what would make us happy. So I have a question. Are there external stimuli in our environment which claim to know the answer to what happiness requires? And I think there are. And I think you can think of a variety of media and other stimuli that are trying to convince us of what would make us happy. And then the question is this good for human happiness? Another question is, and this is where we do the reflective somersault of philosophy, how do I know I'm happy? But I think that's a good question. I think that's a great question. Because if it's the case that we are accepting our criterion for what makes a successful and happy life from outside of us and trusting sources that are telling us what will make us happy, then it could be that those sources themselves, like all the people Socrates talked to, don't really know what happiness is either. Right? What if I learn my life choices are the result of training and education in a certain media environment that is powerful enough to trump other inputs? I want to suggest to you that advertising is one of these external stimuli and probably one of the most powerful sources of what is considered to be a path to happiness. I mean, I mentioned the millennials, the millennial generation before. Some of the people here are the millennials, most of the people here. And it is the fact that you are the most advertised to generation in the world. 20 years ago in business literature, they were doing studies of how much advertising people encountered in a day in just 20 years ago, before the internet. If you took an average American, how much radio they listened to, how much TV they watched, and how many sorts of ads, billboards, labels they encountered in a day, the number of advertisements was something like 3,000 per day. 3,000 advertising images per day, and that was from a university press, very well-respected university press book in a business literature series. You may ask yourself, well, are there more advertisements now or less? But there's something about advertising and its relationship to human happiness that Sut Jali, a professor of communications at UMass Amherst, has put his finger on. And I think he's really done a wonderful job, and I've learned a lot from reading and actually watching some videos that are available online. He says this: advertising, and you can see we both go to the same barber, advertising takes real desires and says they are only satisfied by purchasing products. Right? What does he mean there? He means that when you look at an advertisement, and just think of advertisements in magazines, on TV, advertisements take real human values like hanging out with friends, romantic intimacy, leisure time, meaningful life experiences, and it ties those intangible, immaterial, experiential forces to a particular object. Right? A lot of friends sitting around together, right? Enjoying an evening together, but with a beer. Look at this car. See how respected this man is for having this particular car? Respect itself, something we want from each other. Well, this car is going to give it to you, right? You can do that with almost any commodity in the advertising process. Tying a real human value to an inanimate object that cannot give you the value. And that's the second part of what I'd like to say about the structure of advertising, is that there's something a little cruel about it, because it seduces us to associate a real human value to something that by its very structure cannot achieve that value, right? And thus it sets the need and the dissatisfaction necessary for the consumption economy to continue hurtling forward. I think that's something that questioning leads us to. And I think that when we articulate questions like this about human happiness and something as powerful as the global economy, we have something like a contest between ideas of what happiness is constituted by. So, questioning. Right? Just looking at advertising, but questioning with respect to a variety of power structures is, I think, essential, according to Socrates, for human happiness. It's dangerous. It's dangerous to your plans, your expectations, your path of life. Right? How many of us in our college years were pre-med? Our parents were very happy we were pre-med. And then we took literature. And then we went home for Christmas break. I think I want to major in English. Your parents start arguing with each other, blaming that on each other, right? It is dangerous. It can change you deeply. But I want you to pose this question to yourself, because questioning does put you in a certain tension with accepted norms and accepted roles in society. Is it as dangerous as its opposite, not questioning, when so many social forces compete for our loyalties for purposes that don't take into consideration our own personal happiness? The advertisement isn't constructed to make you happy. It is not the purpose of advertisement to do that. It's to make you buy the thing. It doesn't care whether you're happy or not. And that's something to really consider when we look at how many advertisements and how much consumption we're encouraged to engage in to be part of what is promoted as the good life in our media environment. I want to close today with something that sort of confirms this. There's a book by Bronnie Ware, and she was a nurse engaged in palliative care for end-of-life patients. And she started to blog, and she started to pay very close attention to what people at the end of their lives were saying were their regrets. And these are the top 5 regrets of the dying, right? Number 1, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. 2, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. Finally, I wish I had let myself be happier. Right? It's a very interesting list, right? But notice, not a single of those 5 regrets has anything to do with consumption, with wealth, with status, keeping up with the Joneses, or anything like that. I think it's very instructive to think about the top 5 regrets of the dying. And I think it's a philosophical philosophically rich insight to think to ourselves, what kind of regrets do I want to have when I am in the position of those who recorded these as their regrets? Thanks very much.